So before I get started explaining this was me creating the one of the first layouts for my magazine, but I unfortunately lost this file because it didn't save properly. So I had to create this whole page again, and there were a few changes that I ended up making, and I didn't end up recording that, but I've decided to use this anyway because it shows my process. There were just a couple of minor changes, so I'm adding in my cover image here that I chose because it was, I think it was one of the best images from that shoot. It's really bright and eye-catching, and I think it summarises the theme of that shoot really well. It looks very joyful and childlike. So I decided to go for a sort of pale green colour, because there's a little bit of green in the image, but there's also a lot of pink, and I wanted contrasting but still quite complementary colour schemes for this. So I tried going for a pink, and it just looked too warm and just sort of overwhelmed it with pink. So a nice, cool green looked a lot nicer with this. So I decided to go for nice pastel green. Chose pastel colours for all of the layouts because it's supposed to be a nice, peaceful, quite safe feeling magazine, and I wanted the colours in the actual images themselves to stand out. So I'm just adding in my actual images there, and trying to work around having different aspect ratios to lay them out, because I took the photos with different aspect ratios depending on what sort of fit the shot better, but I worked out in the end, so I just readjusted them to be a similar kind of size, and ended up going with the two vertical images on the bottom and the landscape image on the top, and just resized a little bit because I thought that was the best looking layout. So I just had to mess around with that a little bit and see what didn't make it look super top heavy, and what didn't completely overwhelm the page, so all of the photos had equal size. So I think I did decide to go with that layout on this. So I'm just resizing the bottom two images a little bit so they're a bit bigger, and resizing the top image more so everything looks a bit more equal, and then just shuffling them around a little bit to make sure that all the gaps between them look a lot more equal. Then I went looking for some line drawings of flowers of some PNGs that I could use, just to decorate everything. This took a little bit of trial and error. There were lots to choose from, but not all of them I liked very much. So I was just looking. These were all from Google Images, which will be credited on the back of the magazine. So just looking for those. I wanted some line drawings to kind of add to that childlike, very carefree kind of look that I had going on with it. I didn't want any super detailed flowers or anything like that because they were going to be really small anyway, so I didn't want to kind of have too much detail. So I found this little vine corner graphic and decided to try that to decorate just on the corners of things. So I was just waiting for that to export, I think. And then use that on the corner of the images, but it looked very odd to me, and it didn't really fit with the theme of it. I thought even overlapping it on the corners, it just looked a bit strange because the edges were way too sharp. So I got rid of that, decided to do something else. And I also hadn't recoloured that like I could with what I ended up using in the end. So I picked this flower, which was really nice, and decided to make it look like it's sort of coming out of the back of the frame, and just erase that other one on the top there. And I liked that a lot better. It looked a lot more natural, but I didn't like the colour of it very much, but I solved that problem in a bit. Here I was just testing where to put them, how to lay them out, how to make it look like it was part of it. So I wanted to overlap them with the photos to create more depth and make the photos look like they were more sort of melded together with the layout. I needed something to kind of bring the green background and the foreground of the photos together, and these flowers are a really nice way to do that. And it also ties in that nature theme and just makes it look nice and elegant, but also not super overdone. So I really like the effect that these gave. So I'm just erasing some of the edges so it looks like it's kind of coming really naturally out of the back of the image there. And I think just messing around with adding more of them, resizing them in different places, trying to kind of create some nice lines and not add too many of them, just so they looked natural and not like I was overwhelming the whole layout with flowers, because I wanted the images themselves to still stand out and the flowers to just be kind of a little added bit of decoration. So just adding another one in there, getting rid of that extra little flower which I didn't use on any of them. I prefer just the individual bunch of them there. That looked much nicer to me. And just resizing that a little bit and flipping it around just so I had some variation on what sides of the photos they started from. So I really liked that. I really like how the flowers look. They look really natural and tied it together nicely to have the same graphic just in different places. There was just enough variation, but it also looked consistent. So I achieved the variation by just flipping them around and using them at different angles and things like that to make them look different enough to not just look like I've copied and pasted the same thing over and over again, but also consistent and not distract from the images. So that was how that ended up looking. First of all, I really liked that. I was happy with the choice of graphic that I decided to use. So here I decided to try and recolour the flower so I could have it match with the theme. So I used the clipping mask feature on Photoshop and added the colour over the top and changed the opacity to about 60%. And initially went for green flowers to match the actual background, but I will soon figure out that's a bad idea. So I decided to go for pink for that nice contrast again and to bring in a little bit of the pink from the images as well. So just cropping it to get rid of that flower, and then I think exporting that and saving it to my magazine graphics folder for the project. And then I just deleted the flowers that I had used for that and decided to replace them with these flowers. In hindsight, I shouldn't have deleted all of them at the same time so I could get the same placements and remember where they all actually were. But I really like the look of these flowers. They complement the green really nicely. They bring in the pink from the images and they just add that little bit of extra personality and customization to each of the layouts. And this stayed consistent throughout all of the rest of them, even though a few things about the text changed from this layout. The flowers and the complementary colour to the background stayed the same for all of them. Everyone had a different background colour and a different flower colour just to reflect the individuality of everyone that was involved and to give each of their double page spreads a bit more personality and make them more interesting and memorable, rather than just having exactly the same layout and same colours, just with different subjects. So there I am, just erasing some of the edges just to meld it a little bit better with the photos, and just drawing a little bit of an edge there that I didn't really like very much, and just making sure it looked nice and well put together. So I think I'm just checking how the colour looks on the background there, and I really like that shade of pink. so I decided to keep that. I thought it matched really nicely with the rest of the photos. I think I added more flowers because there are a few more on the other layout that I did before I recoloured the flowers. But I wanted to use the bigger flower to create a nice diagonal line that sort of draws the eye down the page, and then I think used some smaller ones elsewhere. So here I am now picking the font for the person's name. This font also changed to a slightly messier typewriter font, which I didn't record. I chose a different font because I like the typewriter, because it looks a little bit retro, but I decided to go for a slightly thicker and more messy looking font to look a bit more casual, and also so it would be more readable, as this one was a little bit difficult to see. And the other big change I made on the other layouts after creating this one was that I put these credits onto the right hand side of the page rather than the left, because it was a bit hard to read, again, over the top of such a busy image. So I used the custom font for each person that I picked, which was in a separate file. I just picked these according to each person's sort of personality. So I chose that font for Becky because it looked very childlike, very hand-drawn, really casual and youthful, like her shoot. So I think there I am trying to pick a new typewriter font, and that was the one that I ended up going with, which was the John Doe font, and that was what I used for the rest of the project, and I like that one a lot better. So there I'm replacing the text that I've used there and just making sure it's in the right font, and that was a lot more readable, but it was still a little bit difficult to see on the background. So like I said, the other big change that I made was just moving the model credit and their topic title onto the right hand side of the page, onto the plain background, and that worked out a lot better. But unfortunately I didn't record that because I'm a bit silly. So I'm just shuffling all of that around there. I think I added a drop shadow onto the back of those words. I think I used the darker colour of pink, or took the pink that I used and created like a darker shade of it to kind of complement, and use that behind. Yeah, there I am making the drop shadow. So I took that colour of pink and then just used the light setting and brought down the value of it, so it would be darker, and then use that to create a shadow. Unfortunately, because the background was so many different colours, and because this font was really thin, it didn't really do very much to make it more readable. I do like this effect, and I did use the drop shadow in my final layouts, but I used just black because it looked a lot more consistent and professional, and this didn't do very much to make it more readable, but I did like the effect, so that's why I kept it. It also makes the text stand out a lot more from the page itself, and just draws the eye to it a little bit more, so people see that first and then look at the images. So I tried doing a black shadow there, or I think that was a very, very dark pink shadow, and that didn't really do very much to help because, again, the font was too thin. So I think I was just asking for some feedback there. And it was too thin to read, and people were finding it difficult to read. So yeah, there we go.